The PlayStation 3 was supposed to be the future. At least, that's what Sony believed. When they revealed it back in 2005, they promised it would be more powerful than anything gamers had ever seen. It wasn't just another console. Sony wanted it to feel like a supercomputer sitting under your TV. And on paper, they weren't wrong. The PS3 had an incredibly powerful processor called the Cell. Sony was so confident in it that they believed it could change the future of computing. But then developers got their hands on it, and almost immediately, things started going wrong. See, most game consoles worked in a pretty simple way. You gave the processor a bunch of jobs, and it worked through them one by one. That's how developers had been making games for years. The PS3 didn't work like that. Instead of using several normal processor cores, Sony built something completely different. Imagine you're running a restaurant. Normally, you hire a team of chefs. Every chef knows how to cook almost anything. Now, imagine replacing them with one master chef and 7 assistants. The master chef can do every job, but the assistants are only good at very specific tasks. If you don't organize them perfectly, they just stand there doing nothing. That's basically how the PS3 worked. The problem wasn't that the hardware was weak. It was that developers had to completely change the way they made games. And that took years. Meanwhile, Microsoft took a much simpler approach with the Xbox 360. Its hardware looked much more like a regular PC, so developers already knew how to use it. Most studios built the Xbox version first because it was easier, then tried moving it over to the PS3 later. But games don't magically adapt to completely different hardware. The code had to be rewritten, and many studios simply didn't have the time. That's why so many PS3 versions ended up with lower frame rates, longer loading times, or worse graphics. But the processor wasn't the only challenge. Sony also split the PS3's memory into 2 separate parts. Half was reserved for the processor, while the other half was only for graphics. Imagine packing for a vacation with 2 suitcases. One is completely full, while the other still has room left. Normally, you'd just move some clothes over, but on the PS3,
It just can't do that.
developers constantly had to decide what deserved those precious megabytes. Better textures, more enemies, higher quality sound? Every choice meant sacrificing something else. For many studios, it became a nightmare. But then something interesting happened. Sony's own developers slowly started figuring everything out. Naughty Dog was one of them. Instead of treating the Cell like a normal processor, they designed their engine around it. One part handled animation, another handled physics, another worked on audio. Suddenly, all those assistant processors finally had something useful to do. The results were unbelievable. Games like Uncharted 2 and The Last of Us looked generations ahead of almost everything else. People couldn't believe they were running on the same console that struggled with basic ports. It proved something important. The PS3 wasn't difficult because it lacked power. It was difficult because almost nobody knew how to unlock that power. But by the time developers finally mastered it, the generation was almost over. Sony had learned an expensive lesson. When it came time to design the PlayStation 4, they went in the complete opposite direction. No experimental processor, no complicated architecture, just hardware that looked much more like a regular PC. Developers loved it. Games became easier to build, ports became much smoother, and studios could spend less time fighting the hardware and more time making better games. Looking back today, the PS3 is one of the strangest consoles ever made. It frustrated developers, delayed projects, and caused countless technical headaches. But it also gave us some of the most impressive games of its generation. Maybe that's what makes it so memorable. It wasn't the easiest console to develop for. In fact, it was probably one of the hardest. But for the studios that managed to master it, the results spoke for themselves. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.